Wyoming came in second last year as the state with the highest rate of suicide, which is not unusual. In 2012, it topped the list. We know that 90% of young people nationally committing suicide have at least one major psychiatric disorder, and that many areas of our state have a shortage of mental health professionals and services available. So what should you do if you suspect a loved one has a mental illness or things aren't right with you? Joining Wyoming Signature's Leslie Wagoner is Amye Trefethen. Trefethen is with the National Alliance on Mental Illness and an instructor for the Family to Family course.
What is the first step if you think you have a loved one and you think they might have a mental illness?
I think that a good first step would be to contact an organization like NAMI, and NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness. Each NAMI, each state has their own NAMI organization, and ours is called NAMI Wyoming. And they're a large grassroots nonprofit organization that provides education, advocacy, and support. So they're a great place to go for information.
And is that the same kind of advice you'd give to someone who they themselves think they might have a mental illness, an issue there?
Yes, I think that NAMI is a great place to make that first call because they can connect you with other resources. And the Wyoming Department of Health also has a website that lists some mental health centers for each county and community in the state of Wyoming.
Okay, that's good to know. So you have that contact information and you're a family member of someone, a loved one. What are some advice you can give, say, beyond going to an organization? Is there any, say, do you need to do direct intervention? What types of advice would you give on that?
It depends on if your relative is having a crisis. If your relative seems like they might harm themselves or harm another person, then you want to call a police officer first and foremost, or take your relative to the emergency room for their safety and for yours. If you suspect that they might have a mental illness and they're not in a place of crisis, I think the first step is to educate yourself about what mental illness really is.
Well, I find that interesting that you said educate yourself. So there's a component in here of educating yourself and kind of maybe even taking care of yourself, not just your loved one. What do you say about that?
Well, for NAMI, I'm a family-to-family teacher, and in our family-to-family group, it's a 12-week class that is completely free. We educate about all of the major mental illnesses, signs and symptoms, prognosis, causes, the science behind the brain and all of that. We also teach several different workshops on communication, problem-solving skills, and how to go about recognizing your own grief process and the illness process and grief process for your loved one. We also teach self-care, how to take care of yourself, because basically it's the entire family that has to deal with a mental illness and the crisis and the upheaval that it brings into our lives.
Say you have someone who's older, in their 30s, 40s, 50s even. How do you deal with someone, a loved one in that situation, where you really you're a parent, but they're a full adult at this time?
I think at that point, you would have a role that would be more of a supportive role. You would still want to try to guide your loved one towards the best services in their interest, but obviously you're not in control of them, they're not a child. So you try to treat that person with respect and dignity and support like you would if you had a relative who was in that age group who suddenly had cancer or had heart disease or any other illness.
That's interesting you say it like that, because it is a physical illness.
Except for that it's not often thought of that way. There's a lot of stigma in society, and there's a lot of labels associated with mental illness. If you had a heart condition, I wouldn't call you heart attack lady. If you had cancer, I wouldn't call you cancer girl. But suddenly if you have a mental illness, you're crazy or a lunatic, or it's almost like there's something wrong with your soul, like it's a character defect.
Yeah.
But it really is an illness like any other.
So turning the tables and saying, someone comes to NAMI and they think they have a serious or a mental illness, what do you recommend for them?
Well, NAMI has several programs. They have a lot of information on mental illnesses, and they have a program that's similar to family called Peer-to-Peer. It's also a 12-week class. It's completely free, and it provides the same kind of support, because in family to family, there's family members who are teaching, supporting, and talking to other family members. In peer-to-peer, you have other peers. You have other people who have mental health illnesses, and they provide that same kind of information, education, support, and tools that are useful to living life with a mental illness.
Okay, so that's really some strategies of, and maybe even some help with medication, perhaps? Or is that not part of what?
It would probably be more information on medication and how to get connected to a medication provider, or how to get connected to mental health services in the state. NAMI cannot really make any recommendations on specific medications, but they can definitely give you sort of a roadmap of where to go to look for that kind of information.
Okay, very important. And here we are in Wyoming, a very rural state. How does Wyoming NAMI handle that rural aspect?
We try to communicate as much as possible, sometimes by the phone if we need to, because, you know, weather provided, you might not be able to get around the state. A lot of times our meetings will be centrally located. We have a lot of events in Casper because it's sort of easier for everyone to get there. And our executive director, her name is Tammy Noel, she travels a lot all over the state to try to go visit each local affiliate. So you have this umbrella of NAMI Wyoming, and underneath that are each local affiliate organization.
Is it almost like a hotline type of thing? Is there where someone would call, I need help now? Is it that aspect as well?
I think it can be. If you call and you need help, NAMI Wyoming will definitely get you connected with services. Then there are community mental health services as well that are organized by the state of Wyoming in the Wyoming Division of Health. And there's a community mental health center for every region in the state of Wyoming. Most of those community mental health centers have a crisis line that you can call 24/7 and speak to someone who can help you. And community mental health centers are kind of a sliding scale fee. It's a pay-as-you-go, which is helpful.
Yeah. So Amye, how did you get involved with NAMI?
Well, I was diagnosed with bipolar I disorder when I was 27 years old. And at that point in time, my family didn't really have any resources or anywhere to turn. They just didn't know what to do. So for me to be involved with Family to Family and to be involved with NAMI serves two purposes. The first one, I'd like to reduce stigma in the community about mental illness and kind of change those misconceptions that it is anything other than an illness. The other part, and my reason for being involved with Family to Family, is because I don't really want any other family to have to go through what my parents went through without having any support, any information, even knowing where to turn.
Definitely. Well, and to finish our interview, do you have any anecdotes you'd like to share? Maybe people who have blossomed through this program?
I've had a lot of family members take this program in Laramie, and they were just absolutely amazed by the program. Many of them are looking into becoming Family to Family teachers themselves. And that's what's so beautiful about it, because you take this hard situation you've been given in your life and you're able to flip that and become a teacher to help someone else. And a lot of the parents and family members that have taken the class just say that it's really opened their eyes and made them see their relative and their illness in a whole new light.
Just one more thing, a little bit more about when you're taking care of yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it?
Well, I think to help anybody else, you first have to help yourself. If you think about an airplane, when they give the instructions to mothers that when the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself and then put that mask on your child, it's kind of that same philosophy. If you're going to be caregiving for any person in your family who has any kind of illness, you're going to have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself too, so that you don't get sick on top of it. And mental illness can be very, very stressful for families.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amye. This was a really enlightening interview.
Thank you.